And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
for the cinema review.
It is Monday, October 23rd, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Cinemasters Reviews. Only have one review. We're only reviewing one movie this weekend. Only had time to really get out to the theater just one time. Sometimes that happens. But if there's ever an episode where we could devote a whole episode to one movie, I think it is this one. We are, of course, going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's new film, Killers of the Flower Moon. And in order to talk about this movie with me, I mean, he's been on the show many times, but like, if there's anyone who loves Scorsese more than me, that I think is more synonymous with loving this director, it's Kirk the Consigliere Kawakowski. Kirk, how are you doing tonight?
Good, Payson. Thank you for having me on. I know there's a lot of people who would be in consideration for that position, so I appreciate you thinking of me.
Absolutely. Well, I say we jump right into this movie. Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Scorsese and Eric Roth. This follows the true story of 1920s Oklahoma. It follows the Osage people, who at the time were the richest group of people per capita in America, because the land that they were sold unknowingly at the time had a giant oil deposit below it. So they were able to control all the commerce. Little did they know, some of the white settlers decided, you know what, we kind of want to come in and see if we can control that oil. So a certain man by the name of William Hale, played by Robert De Niro, enlists his uncle, enlists his nephew, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, to come in and see what he can do in order to take that sort of commerce down. And as the movie goes on, more Native Americans start to die, and a lot of tragedy and a lot of horrific parts of this country's history are displayed. Kirk, I feel it's kind of redundant to ask you what's your history with Martin Scorsese, but I'm going to do that and try to make it quick. But also, what was your history with this book per se?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. As far as Scorsese goes, I go back to my mom back in like the VHS days. That's how far I go back. We go to the video store. We'd run a bunch of movies for the weekend, and my mom was a big Scorsese fan. So I wasn't necessarily watching the movies at that point, but, we'd have like Goodfellas or Color of Money or something like that. It would be on, and it'd be like kind of just on in the house. So it wasn't until a few years later when I was a little older, I started watching it, on my own, and you really discover them, getting into them. But it's kind of something that for me was always there. As far as the book goes, I never read it, and I was not aware of this story or this, portion of history until, I watched this movie.
No, yeah. Throughout my life, I'd say there have been 4 directors that I would have called like my favorite of all time. Scorsese is one of them. I'd say he was the second director I ever called my favorite director, and I still would consider him one of the top guys working it. Like I've said it before, like Paul Thomas Anderson is my favorite filmmaker working today. Scorsese is the best guy. Like for 50 years, he is just putting out quality on quality on quality. There was a time when I considered Goodfellas my favorite movie of all time. Now it's my 3rd favorite film of all time. But like, there are very few movies I've seen as much as that film. I love King of Comedy. I love After Hours. Yeah. And I think the run he has been on, like in the 2010s till now, I think has been like maybe one of the best runs of his entire career. Yeah. I know some people aren't like the biggest fan of Hugo, but like Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, which I think is a masterpiece of a film, The Irishman, and now this. So going
just the diversity of the movies he's putting out too. Exactly. He did Hugo, he did Wolf of Wall Street, all these at his age. The output is just is ridiculous.
and I've said it before, like, if you were to ask me what is my favorite movie scene of the 2010s, the scene where Sebastian finally gives in and steps on, like, makes the decision to give up his faith in silence is maybe the most harrowing scene of the 2010s. Like, to me, like, it's one that when I watch it, it physically takes me out of breath because of how well done it's done. And yeah, like, a man in his 70s making these types of movies. So going into it, I was obviously very excited. I had not read the book. I kind of vaguely knew what it was about. I knew it was kind of a murder mystery. Although this movie doesn't really, like, calling it a murder mystery is maybe a little bit of a stretch, but I definitely see why someone would call it that. But I knew kind of what it was about. And that being said, I absolutely loved this movie. And one of the major aspects of why I really loved it was I think the world it establishes in terms of setting and tone, I think is perfect for that time period. Like, for a Western that's set in the 1920s in Oklahoma, just how alive, like, the sounds feel, like, all the costumes are completely authentic. What the Native Americans are wearing, like, feels real. Like, what I'm watching, like, you feel like you are there on this reservation out in the Old West. What did you think about, like, how this movie made you, like, feel in terms of setting, Kirk?
Oh yeah, it's such a unique setting. That's something I loved about it right away. Is just this. It has the old west feel. You know, it could very easily you take out some of the technology. Very could well be something that took place in the 1880s. But you have the cars and the music and things like that to make and the costumes to make it a little more modern. And you have this kind of something that struck me is you have opulence and almost a type of poverty just hand in hand existing in the same space, and just the look of it and the feel of it. I can't think of a movie that's ever shown me that kind of world before.
Yeah, I think when a movie really, like, hits home, like, when, like, people when, like, the poverty line to, like, the wealth line is so close together, and when it shows how close these people can be together, I think that can often be very effective. And yeah, like you said, I think it was really effective here. Yeah, like you said, this movie is set in the 20s, which is normally sort of attributed to, like, the end of like, the Western era of America. Like, laws were in place. You could not, like, go into a bar anymore and just shoot someone to get your problems out. Although a lot of people get their problems out in this movie by murder, which we'll get to that. But yeah, like, just if the cars were not there, I think you would totally think this movie took place in the 1800s. But I think with that technology, and like you said, the soundtrack, Scorsese movies almost always have great soundtracks. And this one is no exception. I think it really helps set that tone and set that setting of you. This movie just feels lived in the best way possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the cast of this movie, I think Scorsese assembled out I was about to say one of his best casts. I'm just gonna say a really good cast, because I think with all the movies he's made, I think I need to look at his cast, like, individually to say what is the best cast he's ever had. But what I will say is the main strong players, there is not a weak link among them. Let's start with Leonardo DiCaprio. He plays Ernest Burkhart. He is the nephew of Robert De Niro's character, and he's kind of brought in, just he's sort of an outsider. We see that before he got involved with his uncle, he was sort of a scoundrel in a way. Like, he committed some crimes, and his uncle is kind of giving him this big break to essentially weave his way into the Native American family. At first, it seems like that's all there is to get the wealth, but as the movie unfurls, we sort of see, there might be something a little bit more sinister as to what he's doing. I think he was phenomenal. Like, I know DiCaprio sometimes gets a little bit of crap for his accent work. I think his accent work was perfect here. Like, this was some of the most authentic DiCaprio I've seen in a while, especially in terms of drama. Like, in the scenes where he has to be super emotional, and the scenes where he has to play someone who is obviously leading a double life and trying to trick people, I think he does that really well. And I think he was a phenomenal anchor to this film. What did you think about DiCaprio in this movie, Kirk?
Yeah, I think he's great. The character he creates is so interesting because he's just so. And it's hard to make a 3.5 hour movie focused on a person like this because he's so spineless.
Yeah.
He's just going with the waves, like with when he's with a certain group of people, they tell him what to do. He does that, and he thinks that. There's another group of people, that's what he thinks, that's what he's going to do, and he's trying to live in both worlds, and he thinks he can, and he's doing obviously a piss poor job of it. And just how kind of sad and pathetic this guy is, and not in a very way where you look at him and feel bad for him. He's just a loser, and he gets caught up in this thing, and he's completely in it over his head. And they got the puppet strings on him, and you see there's certain scenes where you just really see them kind of roll over him with that iron fist, De Niro and the others around him, because everybody's around him just pushing him around. And it was a really interesting departure for the kind of character he usually plays.
No, yeah, I think the fascinating thing about Ernest in this movie is there is not a moment in the film where he is not the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
Or like every single person has something over this guy, and at no point does he even in the scenes where he's with Molly, even you seem like Molly knows what, at all times she knows what he's doing, and I think that gets into Lily Gladstone's performance, which I'm going to get into. Let's just jump into this. I know Lily Gladstone has been in some TV projects. I don't watch the show Reservation Dogs. I hear she's really good in this. I think Martin Scorsese giving her this role was such an excellent idea, because I think she is incredible as the character of Molly Burkhart, the person that Ernest ends up marrying, having a family with. She ends up becoming stricken with disease as the movie goes on. Something I think is fascinating about Lily Gladstone. People were really high on Florence Pugh's performance in Midsommar because of how much she got just by her facial reactions. I never quite got that from that performance. This is that performance to me.
Yeah.
Lily Gladstone is getting across so much with this character with such little dialogue.
Yeah.
There are scenes where she is just looking at Ernest, or just looking at people looking at her, and you know exactly what that character is thinking, what she's feeling. And I just think Gladstone was incredible in this film. I hesitate. I would personally call her the 1A, 1B, co-lead to Ernest in this movie, because I think so much of the movie is focused around her.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great idea from Scorsese to have two essentially point of view characters between Ernest and Molly. And I think the fact that Lily Gladstone is going toe to toe with DiCaprio, like you think of that first scene when they meet in the taxi, or scenes later in the movie where maybe that love is lost in their marriage, I just think is incredible. What did you think about Lily Gladstone in this movie, Kirk?
Yeah, I think there's going to be you're going to see a lot of think pieces from people who just don't get it, and who are quick who really want to go after Scorsese for his how he writes women or how he directs women, whatever, because of her. Like you said, there's a relative lack of, or shortage of dialogue from her compared to some of the other main characters. Excuse me, but there's a line at the beginning where De Niro is explaining, life with the Osage people to DiCaprio, and he says, just because they don't say much doesn't mean they don't know everything that's going on.
Yep.
And she personifies that throughout the entire movie, and you see that so much because their relationship obviously goes through a lot, and I think there's hope from her that he still is doing the right thing, but kind of that knowledge that he's not, and just he's playing checkers and she's playing chess the entire movie, and he's running his mouth trying to talk his way out of things. She doesn't have to talk, she doesn't have to say anything, she knows what's going on. The other thing about her performance is there are a lot of horrible things that happen to this character in this movie, and you bring up Florence Pugh in Midsommar. I think that's a good comparison, because you see her, it's the same kind of character where, and this is why I don't love that performance, because she's going through a lot of things, and it's very one note. It's like one emotion the entire movie. Where I think with Lily Gladstone does, you see her go through a lot of different types of grief at different periods, and she makes that real, and she keeps you connected with that. You don't get. It sounds callous, but sometimes you can get sick of seeing a character cry, or sick of seeing the character be sad. But she connects you with her so much that you continue to feel with her, continue to sympathize with her, and continue to be interested in what's happening to her.
No, I completely agree. I think part of that is because Scorsese does such a great job at showing how painful and how horrible the lives of the Osage people were at this time, without maybe like going towards like a point. Like I think some filmmakers might like may have gone like a little extreme. I like this movie's very violent. I don't think it ever like goes to that like extreme level as maybe like a I don't even know, like, okay, like Eli Roth would never make a film like this, but if Eli Roth did make a film like this, there'd be like scalping and stuff. Like,
Sure, yeah.
you never see that. But honestly, I think because of how subdued it is, and just how like, honestly, like, what's the right word?
I think it's real. I think it's everything.
Real.
The violence is real, and the reaction to the violence is real.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a filmmaker I love. If Tarantino was doing this film, it would feel way more stylized than what we get. Yeah. Like Scorsese doesn't have time for that. He's like, no, these people are dying. Sometimes it's just by gunshots, but that is still horrible. Like just every single death, you're like, whew.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Lily Gladstone, like the one of the first scenes where we see Molly talking with her Osage friends, and they're talking in the native language, and they're just all talking about Ernest's character and how they're all like sort of giving Molly a little bit of crap, but she's like, I don't know, I kind of like him, I'm willing to give him a chance. And then just you see, like, I don't want to get into spoilers, but one of the last scenes of the film involves someone lying to her, and you can tell by how Gladstone plays it, she knows it. She absolutely knows the person is lying to him, is lying to her, but she doesn't say anything. She's just like, okay, and you can just see it in her eyes, and I think that's just so fascinating. The last major player in this movie I think we need to talk about is Robert De Niro as William Hale, Ernest's uncle, the one who brings them into this job. I think this is De Niro's best performance of the century. Like, I think this is the best I think I've seen him in a long, long time. And I think one of the fun things is that when he first shows up, he's kind of like this fun guy that like you want to like he gets you on his side pretty quickly. But then as the movie goes on, like there's never like a moment where he becomes like mustache twirly in any way, but just the things he does and just sort of how nonchalant he is about it, of like, yo, I'm in this for the money and you're going to help me get this, I think is what makes this character so sinister. And I think the conversations between De Niro and DiCaprio, like this is the first Scorsese movie that they have ever been in. And with them being two muses that he has worked with, it lived up for me. It lived up to the moment I think we've all been waiting for. Like, obviously there's a lot more of them interacting than there is in something like Heat with Pacino and De Niro, but it felt like that for me, of like, here are these two legends that Scorsese has used for so long, and we're finally going to have them go toe-to-toe with each other, and I think their dynamic in this movie is phenomenal. What did you think about De Niro in this film, Kurt?
Yeah, I think he's great. I think one of the most interesting things to me is that he is, like you said, you want to believe him.
Yes.
Because he comes in and he presents himself as this like benevolent helper to the Osage people. He's here for them, and you even see he has relationships. He calls it like, "Hey, this is my best friend. This is a family I've seen these kids grow up. I care about these people. I like these people. I want to be with these. I want to see them. Good things happen to them." And you want to believe him so much, and he's really selling it. And it's the way he just talks out of both sides of his mouth, where you almost believe he believes it. Like he thinks he cares about these people. Like he can have those two things can exist in this guy's head at the same time, where I care about these people, but I can also murder them when necessary to get what I need from them. And you just see, like you said, how nonchalant, the banality of that kind of racism, where he sees them as even though it's almost like they're pets to him. Like he sees them as less than human. Where he keeps saying like this isn't going to last for them anyway, so we might as well take it. We'll do better with it. We know what to do with it. They're not meant to have these kind of people aren't meant to have this kind of success. So just the mental hoops and gymnastics he goes through to solidify all that in his mind, that care he has for these people and what he's willing to do to them is just crazy. And I think he plays it off so well. And there's so many subtle moments De Niro has in this. obviously he's the fact that he's very two-faced. There are certain moments where something will happen and he's in a crowd of people, and it's for those people it's good news and they're happy, but he's not happy about it. And he'll be smiling and he'll be shaking hands and he'll be hugging people, and then he'll make eye contact with somebody who's in the know with him, and his face will just drop. And you'll see that facade drop for a second, and you see the real person and what he's really feeling. And again, it's one of those things where without any words, he's communicating everything he has to communicate. And then, in the blink of an eye, the smiley face is back on, and he's doing all that. So a lot of that kind of work in here from De Niro. And I agree, this is definitely one of I put obviously the Irishman up there too.
Also
but
very good.
I definitely think he's had De Niro's had kind of like a renaissance these past few years from the crap he'd been doing earlier this century. So I'm really happy to see that. And De Niro and DiCaprio together are amazing. I think I compare this to Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix in The Master. The kind of dynamic they had, I think this is a lot to it. I think, and for me, that's very high praise. I know it is obviously from you too, it would be from you too. But I compare it to that. That's how good I think those performances are, playing off each other. Just those two different characters, kind of like yin and yang to each other.
What you said about De Niro, like how William in this movie is usually the one, like he's always playing a character. He's always playing like the political like angle of like, hey, I'm your friend, like I'm doing this for you, and then like just someone just sees him and knows him for what he is, and just that drops for a little. It reminded me of his scenes in The Irishman, where Anna Paquin's character, who I believe plays his daughter, is the only one that can tell who Frank Sheeran is, and say a word but just looks at him, and Frank knows like, yeah, she knows like whose side I'm really on in this. But yeah, I think De Niro was incredible in this film. There's a scene towards the third act of this movie where his character does a decision which like you can tell he's doing it so that way he looks more noble, but you know that the reason why he's doing this is just to look noble, even though he doesn't believe a word of what he's going to do, because he thinks this is just the best way that I can get out of this situation. And I think that was really, really great. I want to talk about how this movie works as a mystery. This movie sets up very early on that the Osage people are dropping at very, very high rates. And while the movie doesn't really hide who is doing it for too long, I think you as an audience member weirdly don't want to believe what you're seeing, and I think that really Scorsese does that in a really effective way. Kirk, how did you feel this movie worked as a mystery film?
Yeah, I think they do a great job setting it up because, like I said, me being unfamiliar with this, this period of history, this time, and this story, I was like, you think like, oh, indigenous people in this country have had such hardship. It opens up with them basically discovering the oil, and they do like the old timey footage of, and you see the pictures of them with the money and them with the cars and all these things, and you're like, oh, finally something good is happening. Like you said, you want that to continue. You don't want it, and then immediately it switches to, you see the other shoe drops and all these mysterious things start happening. And the movie isn't a mystery. Like, you're not sitting there for 3 hours like trying to figure out who does it. Like, it's a mystery to the characters. Some of the characters, not mystery to us as the audience.
That is fair.
But early on, it does take a while to get your bearings. Like, who's doing this? Why are they doing it? How does it work? So it is slowly unfurled within the first act. Everything that's going on, but there's a slow explanation to begin. That's one of the reasons why I don't mind this movie being so long, because it takes time with that. That you learn that how this works, but at first it is, you really don't know what's going on, and you just see these people dropping like flies. You're like, why is this happening?
There is one character in this movie that had one of the Osage characters. Her name is Anna, and the movie keeps on going back to what her death might have been as we sort of learn more clues. And finally, when you have that final scene where it was like, no, it's exactly what you thought could have happened. It's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel like, and I guess that just transitions right to my next point. I think the themes of oppression and the dark side of America ring so true here. And Scorsese has never been one to shy away from the dark aspects of America and certain themes of oppression. We rarely ever get movies like this about indigenous people. I want to be a little careful about where I'm talking from because I know as a white person, I'm not coming from a personal thing. But I personally, as a watcher, I thought it was very, very well done. I didn't think it was preachy like at all. Like I've seen maybe these were attention seeking headlines I saw where I saying like Scorsese's finally going political, and I was like, is that really your take on this film? Like, is that your take? Like, I thought that was stupid. Like, I think this is just a very honest take on the dark side of America, and I thought it was really, really effective. And sometimes I think you need to tell stories like this that just say, I'm going to show you this, and you are not going to look away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any. I mean, it's obviously a political story, but there's no. I think it's like any. I think the beauty of what Scorsese does, whether it's good or bad, he drops you in when he tells a story. He puts you in that world, and he shows you, what the morality looks like inside that world. He doesn't come from outside of it and say, "Hey, look at this. This is right. This is wrong." He just puts you in it and shows you and says, "This is what's happening." And I think he does that here. I don't think he's, obviously, people are going to take a side from. Hopefully, you're going to take a side when you watch this. But it's not like, and he doesn't have to. I don't think it's necessary with this story. I don't think there's two sides to this where anybody else would say, "Oh yeah, that wasn't too bad." But so I mean, I don't think there's a need to get political. But I think unless you're one of those people who just think addressing it is political. Well, it's there, and you got to take a look at it. But no, I think it does a great job. And yeah, there's a lot of little things in there. And I don't think it's meant to be anything but what it is. But there's throughout the movie, there's one minor character, a reoccurring character, who's seen as somebody who has some level of authority. He's not a major player, but he has a level of authority in the town. And you see him pop up a lot, and he's responsible for a lot of things that the Osage people have or don't have. And probably 2.5 hours in the movie, maybe close to 3, there's a scene where there's a parade, and it's a great shot. It's the Scorsese like camera following, and DiCaprio, he's going through this parade, and there's all these different people going through in different groups, and you pan through, and it's blink and you'll miss it. You see the Klan is marching. Yeah, and it's it's the Klan, and that character who has been kind of in charge of a lot of the money and things in the town, he's the leader of the Klan, and it's not even addressed. It just the camera pans by him, they wave to him, he waves back, and that's all you get. But little things like that, like you said, show you the underbelly of this what's happening in this town, and that being a microcosm of America at large.
Yeah, it really just feels gross, but in a very effective way and a very necessary way to tell the story. Before we hit some of the negatives, there's one last. Well, okay, there are two last major positives. One I can just make to be the wrap up of the review, but one thing that I think we need to address. I think the score by Robbie Robertson, so good, so like one of the best. Like I can say this. I think this is one of the best scores in a Scorsese film. Yeah. And I just think how haunting this score, how like the score begins as like weirdly lively, and then by the end it just feels so haunting with everything you are going through. Like I personally, and I don't like to use this metaphor a ton, the score felt like a character in this movie. Like it felt the way how it just, all of the emotions it made you feel and all the like journey it went through. I just thought the score was incredible.
Yeah, I think Scorsese doesn't use a lot of score. Like, he's known much more for his soundtracks than his score. This movie doesn't have much of a soundtrack. It's much more relied on score than a lot of his movies are, but it's so well done. I mean, again, it combines that it feels very Western, but it also feels very modern. It feels like a score that Scorsese would play because it feels like could be, it's something you could hear on like a Rolling Stone album or something, but it also has a very like old time Western feel to it, and it just kind of like a pulse throughout the entire movie. And I'm not a big score guy. Like most of the times I walk out of a movie, people are like, "Oh, the score." I'm like, "Oh, I really didn't notice it." This one is just, you feel it the entire time, and it just ramps up the tension and the emotion throughout. And it's very simple. There's not a lot to it, but it just wraps everything in the entire movie up in a bow.
No, it completely puts you into the world. It makes you feel everything the characters are going through. And yeah, the score was absolutely masterful. There were some faults I did have.
Well,
With
I would say before we get to that, I would say one other thing we should address. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it. I feel like a lot of like the supporting Osage characters, specifically like the tribal leaders. Do you know? I feel like some of those are non-actors.
I definitely felt that. Not in like a bad way.
No, not at all.
They felt extremely authentic. I know Scorsese did a ton of research and a ton of background while doing this film to make it feel as authentic as he could. So I could totally see getting non-actors, but
there are a couple of speeches where these, and again, I don't say that as a negative. I think I think that could work in a lot of movies. It works very effectively. I think it does in this one, where it feels like it's almost like, I don't know if they were given input on the dialogue, but there are a few speeches these guys give, and you feel like you're just authentically. You don't feel like you're watching a movie. You feel like you're authentically hearing a tribal leader from a tribe, from a Native American tribe, just tell their story and express their feelings, and it goes on for a while. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like they were just I don't know if there's a fact on, but it feels like Scorsese was like, just talk. Just say what you're feeling or what you would be feeling in this moment. Because and again, it sounds negative. I don't mean, there's a little bit of a rambling element to it, but it's not like it's like it gets boring. It's just they are pouring their hearts out. And I thought that was really interesting. And like I said, they may have been actors, but if they were great because it felt very real.
No, I think those scenes where you have just these huge town halls of all these characters talking about everything, like all the ways they've been oppressed, all the negative things they've been feeling, and then you just cut to Ernest, and he's just feeling everything, and he's just looking at all of this, like realizing what he's done. I think that was a masterful decision. Scorsese is so good at saying so much with no dialogue, and I think the best filmmakers should do that, because like at the end of the day, I view film as a visual medium, and I think when you can tell when you can tell a lot by not putting dialogue in, I think that's when you have someone who is an incredible storyteller.
Absolutely.
So a few of the negatives I do want to say. I think the first 2.5 hours of this movie go by like, I think they're fire. Like I think there is very little I would cut out. Like I think it absolutely earns its runtime. I think when we get towards the end of the movie, where we're finally addressing the murders, like we need to sort of resolve certain things. I don't want to say it doesn't earn its runtime, but I did start to feel the length a little. I started to feel like we were kind of putting maybe a little bit of fat in it that could have been cut. And that was the point where I was like, okay, like to me, if a movie has a long runtime and I'm not feeling it, that's when I'm like, okay, you earned it. But for some reason, towards the end of the movie, I was like, okay, I'm starting to kind of like wonder when this is going to end. Did you have this issue with the last act of this film?
I personally did not. I could see how you might, because I could see there being, once the investigation starts and once they start, deciding how that's going to play out, I could see that being looked at as a little redundant. I didn't feel that at that point. We'll probably talk about, there's one specific thing that kind of sucked me out of it towards the end. But other than that, I felt like, and it's hard to explain. You do get that like start and stop kind of towards the end. Like, okay, we're moving towards this, we're stopped. It's kind of like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yes, yeah.
But to me, that didn't last long enough, because the ending itself is kind of abrupt. Like you go through that, and then it's like stop, and then you get kind of an epilogue. So it didn't bother. If that epilogue wouldn't happen, and you would have had what the epilogue explains would have been played out, that may have been too much. But I think the movie cuts off at the right point.
I'm gonna save my opinions for the epilogue later. I do want to end on that, but I think what you said about how it just towards the end it just starts feeling like stop. Like it feels like we're starting to hit like certain trait, like we just sort of just disrupt the pace for like I don't want to say unexplainable reasons because I believe Scorsese had a reason to do that, but as a watcher, I was like, on my first time, I was like, okay, I feel like the pacing maybe could have done a little bit towards the last hour of this 3.5 hour film.
Mhm.
And the other major negative, there are a lot of character actors that come into this movie that have like smaller parts, and a lot of them I think are very effective. If you've seen the trailer, Jesse Plemons plays Tom King, who is the FBI agent who comes down to investigate the murders. I think he was really effective. Maybe doesn't have like the most amount to do, but I think what he does, I think he really makes the most out of it. I don't believe he was in the trailer, so I'm not going to say who it was. But the actor they got to play the prosecutor in this film against the alleged murderers, I thought was a super welcome surprise. And I was like, oh, it's him. I always love it when he shows up. I don't want to explain it because I don't because I'm pretty sure that was a surprise, and I do think it would be fun for other people to see that. But then you get the actor who plays the defending lawyer, and this was in the trailer, so I don't feel like we're spoiling. Kirk, go at it. I'll let you go at it.
Yeah, it's pretty well known my feelings on Brendan Fraser as an actor. I'm not a fan. I'll leave it at that. But honestly, in this movie, I was embarrassed for him. Because he comes in at about probably around the 3 hour mark.
Yeah.
And up till now, wall to wall, amazing acting performances. And he walks on the set like, I mean, honestly, it was like throwing a handful of dog crap on the Mona Lisa. Imagine like this, it's the Olympics, and you have Michael Phelps swimming laps, and he's doing a relay, and he comes in and he tags in a 5-year-old kid who's barely learned how to swim. That's honestly what this felt like. I mean, he comes in, and again, I love Scorsese and I trust him, and I can't imagine what he told him and what he wanted from this. But I knew. I mean, when I saw Fraser was in the people were like, why is he in the trailer? I'm like, he's going to be the worst thing in the movie, and he was. And I mean, I was angry because again, I was 3 hours. Didn't think about going to the bathroom. Didn't think about how long this movie was. As soon as he opens his mouth, I am completely sucked out. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening here? So yeah, that really was like I said, that was the turd in the punch bowl for me. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was pretty rough.
No, I'm kind of there with you. I don't have the negative like distaste for Brendan Fraser as an actor quite as you do, but yeah, like you said, he comes in at the 3 hour mark, and you've been having DiCaprio, De Niro, and Gladstone just like absolutely just hitting home runs out of the park throughout this entire movie. And Brendan Fraser comes in, and it feels like he's in a completely different movie. And I think that was my issue. I was like, and like he's doing this weird thing where like he's trying to do an accent to make himself sound like Midwestern, like really like capture the era. But people have made this comparison on Twitter. He sounds like Foghorn Leghorn. Yeah. Like he comes in and he just like you can clearly tell he's trying to do this accent where most of the other actors it feels very authentic. Like okay, like when you watch Gary Oldman do an accent, you don't think it's an accent because he makes it seem seamless. You watch this and you're like, oh, this feels like okay. Here's a good one. Which voice is worse, Keanu Reeves in Bram Stoker's Dracula, or Brendan Fraser in this movie?
Those are both pretty bad.
Yeah.
But he's, for me, it's not just his accent. It's like how big he's trying to be.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he was intimidated. So he was like, I really got to go for this. And what it sounds like he's doing, if I could read his mind, I feel like he is doing a Ned Beatty in Network. Like I think that's what he was going for. But he sounds like somebody who doesn't know how to act doing a Ned Beatty impression from Network. That's what it sounds like. It just sounds like an amateur doing that impression.
And here's the thing about that Ned Beatty scene in Network. that whole scene is focused on him.
Yeah.
Like, he has the spotlight, so it makes sense for Ned Beatty to go a little bit more over, because, like, everyone is watching him. Even when Brendan Fraser shows up, he's still, like, a supporting character in these scenes.
Yeah.
So it feels weird when he's like, my client is not guilty.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we, like, Brendan, like, everyone says this. You seem like a great guy. I want to root for you. But sometimes you just do these and you're like, Scorsese, full respect. This was not Neil Patrick Harris in Gone Girl. This was not Fincher saying, I'm going to take this person you would have no idea could pull this off, and it working. This was like, like you said, it just completely took me out of the movie, and it felt like I was watching a different movie when he shows up.
I've said in 5 years from now, we'll be laughing at the Brendan Fraser Oscar win. It only took like 7 or 8 months.
Fair, yeah. No, there are a lot of Oscar ones I think you can laugh at. But yeah, the last thing I do want to talk about but before we head into the ending, Jack has a question. But Kirk, is Fraser's accent in this worse than any of the accents in The Departed? I think so.
I would say yes, but we get a lot less of it.
Honestly, yeah.
I
think yeah. I think Farmiga's really the only accent in The Departed that I have an issue with, but I
sentence to sentence that accent change.
Yeah. Before we head into our feelings about the ending, is there any other major negative elements that you would like to address?
No, honestly, like I said, that's why that performance really upset me so much, because I was just like, we were just firing on all cylinders. And again, this is a movie I'm going to have to rewatch, multiple times to really digest completely. But I have nothing negative to say. I was with my friend. I went with Kathy and another couple. My friend was there. He said he had to go to the bathroom for 3 hours. Didn't get out of his seat. There was no moment. We all said there was no moment to get up and go. Most movies you have like, okay, I can skip out on this and kind of catch up. There was no moment in this movie you're like, I can cut out for 30 seconds and come back.
No, I strategically planned out my day where I was like, did not drink barely any fluids that day. I was like, I'm gonna have 2 cups of water, and that is it. Like 1 cup of coffee in the morning. Like I'm not risking anything. But yeah, I also made it throughout without going to the bathroom. It absolutely rivets you. The ending of this film, it is the definition of an epilogue. Like, it is the definition of the story is over, and this is an additional scene. And I've seen some people say this ending felt weirdly out of place and weirdly abrupt. I kind of understand the abrupt thing, but I think saying this is out of place, I think you completely misread the film. Because I think what Scorsese is doing in this epilogue is perfection. Like, this is one of the best endings I have seen in years. I do not want to spoil exactly what it is, but I think the theme of what it's saying of all the deaths that we just covered, and we hear the numbers at one point in the movie where hundreds of Osage people are dying, and how they are essentially going to be boiled down to cheap entertainment, and no one is going to remember any of these people's names, I think was genius, and I think was heartbreaking. I adored the ending of this film. What did you think about the ending, Kirk?
Yeah, I thought it was a great, because I expected, the traditional, like, just title cards at the end. This happened to so-and-so did this, and so-and-so died. That's what I was expecting at the end. And they completely go in a different direction, completely very unique way to wrap it up. And like you said, I think it comments so much. There's a line in the movie where somebody says, nobody's going to care about this. People are going to get it. People get upset for a while, and then it's going to go away. No one's going to remember. No one's going to care. And I think this wraps it up, because, stop me if I'm saying too much, but the epilogue takes place sometime after the main events of the story.
You're fine.
And it's being told as a story. Let's say that.
Okay.
For the purposes of entertainment.
Let's stop there. But
yeah. And I think it does such a good job of basically, like you said, saying that, it kind of, I read a review on this and really put it perfectly. It shines a spotlight on us. It literally puts a spotlight on us and say, you're watching this. You came to see a Scorsese movie. You came to be entertained by this story. and you're kind of no better than the rest of what's happening here. And I thought that was kind of a kick in the gut to end the movie with.
When a movie can go after the audience in an intelligent way, I think those are some of my favorite moments in movies, and I think this was a great example.
And it was done really well. It wasn't like, some filmmakers will take an opportunity to just bop you over the head and point the finger and say, you're the problem. Look what you did. You're wrong. And this doesn't do it.
No.
It does it in it's a very entertaining. It is a very entertaining epilogue. And B, it's pointed at you, but it's not like in your face. It makes you think about it. You could see that and completely not even realize that, and just appreciate it for what it is. But it has that layer. If you think about it, it has that layer for you to go home and think about the drive home.
No, it took me until halfway through the epilogue to realize what it was doing, and the second I realized, I was like, "Oh, this is genius. This is absolute genius."
Yeah.
Kirk, before we give our ratings on this film, is there anything else you want to say about this movie?
Yeah, I feel like this is a movie. It's just like The Irishman was the same way. It's going to take me 1, 2, 3 rewatches to really digest all. There's so much here. Like it's a 3.5-hour movie, and it's packed with a lot of ideas, a lot of performances, a lot of different things. So, I'm going to give a rating here, but this is just my first pass at it. This is something I'm definitely going to come back to. It's not going to be easy. I think Scorsese is done with easy movies. I think this is, I hope he gets to make 10 more movies in his career. But I don't think we're ever going to get another Casino. I don't think we're ever going to get another Color of Money. I think he is done. I think he is in a very introspective part of his life where he's at. And I think these more serious, a little more difficult to digest movies are what we're going to get from now on, which is great. But that's going to require, like I said, revisiting. When I watched Goodfellas for the first time, I knew how I felt about Goodfellas. I knew I knew where I was with that movie. This one is going to be one where I'm going to have to go back to and really immerse myself in to get the full picture on.
I completely agree with that sentiment, Kirk. Well, here at Cinemasters Reviews, we do review movies on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being awful, 10 being absolutely incredible. Kirk, if you were to give this movie a score from 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie?
Using everything I just said as a preface, right now I'm going to give it an 8.
8, absolutely. I think that is a great score, especially from you. If I can add that caveat, as we all know, this is one of my favorite movies of the year. As I was sitting back, I was between 2 ratings coming on the show, what I was going to give it, and I am going to give it a very, very high 9.5. Doesn't quite hit that 10 for me like a few other movies have done this year, but Scorsese is the king. Like, this once again proves why come out. Like, I love Nolan, I love Tarantino, I love Paul Thomas Anderson, but Scorsese has been around for decades longer than them, and it feels like whenever he shows up, he's like, okay, you boys are great. Let's let the king cook for a second. And he once again proves, like you said, age doesn't feel like it's affecting him in a way. It does in a way that his movies feel much more meditative, but the energy is still there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everything I said, don't take that as, this movie is duller or more boring than those other movies. Not at all. Like, it still has that. It's a different kind of energy, but it still has 100% Scorsese energy to it.
Yeah, he has the wisdom that you would get from what you get by getting older, but the stamina and the energy you would have, nothing has lost him. And I think that what consistently makes him. I think he's the greatest filmmaker working today, and I think that is the reason why he is. Why I would give him that title.
Yes.
Well, that does bring us to the end of our show. Kirk, before you do head out, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, Silver Screen Time Machine. We're still in the Halloween episodes. I think what dropped today? Oh, Night of the Hunter dropped today. So I'm actually on the episode, but it's still great. So check it out. And keep out for more stuff on there.
If I can just give people a reason to watch Night of the Hunter that is kind of related to this show, I know Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear is obviously a remake of Cape Fear, but if you watch his Cape Fear, it is a big ode at points to Night of the Hunter.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's what makes that movie so, like, honestly, like, go watch, go listen to Silver Screen's Time Machine, but also watch Night of the Hunter because it's one of the best thrillers of all time. But yeah, everyone just remember to like this video, subscribe to the video store. It really helps grow our brand a lot. Next week, from one auteur to another, we are going to be reviewing David Fincher's The Killer. Very excited for that, as well as the film adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy. Kind of seems like we're getting that 5 years too late, but whatever. It's probably still going to make quite a bit of money. So thank you all for watching. I've been Payson. This has been Kirk. This has been Cinemaster's Reviews. And as I always say, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.